Hello, everybody, and welcome to session number 2 of From the Ground Up Western Cover Crop Council's Pacific Northwest Subregional Conference Series. My name is Stephen Hines with the University of Idaho Extension, and I'll be your moderator today. Today, our session topics are going to discuss current cover crop projects in vegetable production. I'd like to take the opportunity now to introduce our next speaker. Doug Collins is with Washington State University Extension, and he is going to be discussing promoting cover crop success with on-farm trials. Doug, welcome.
Thanks, Steve. It's a pleasure to be here. For my presentation, I'm going to show a quick video, and just an introduction to that. This is part of a project that Nick mentioned, the SARE Research to Grassroots project, and also supported from our Pierce Conservation District here in Washington State and the Washington Department of Ecology. And one of the things we're trying to do with this grant is improve and expand on-farm trials to try cover crops in more real-life situations and different soil types, and then capture data and all towards improving cover crop selection and success. And so with that, we'll just, video will take us all back to summer and into the fields a little bit. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Rawley. This is Early Bird Farm. We're a small market garden vegetable farm in the Puyallup Valley, and we're looking at a cover crop trial out in one of our main production fields. This field had vegetables on it last year, and then this spring, and around month of April, we had chickens out here, 500 hens, moved around this field and dropped a lot of manure, so there's some good fertility here. And then we disked all that manure and residual veggies from last year in to prep this ground for a cover crop that seeded on about June 12th, and today is July 22nd, so it's about 40 days in.
Doug Collins here. I'm going to share some more details of our summer cover cropping experiment. One of the strategies we were trialing is to establish clover with a nurse crop of Sudan grass or buckwheat. Clover can be slow to get going and be outcompeted by weeds. Sudan grass and buckwheat create an overstory, and then they can be mowed off or allowed to winter kill. The varieties we used were Mancan buckwheat, Piper Sudan grass, Starfire red clover, and Dixie crimson clover. At Early Bird Farm, we used a land pride minimum till drill, and at another participating farm, Zestful Gardens, also in the Puyallup Valley in western Washington, we used a land pride no-till drill. Buckwheat was seeded at 69 pounds per acre, Sudan grass at 37 pounds, red clover at 14, and crimson clover at 23. In all instances, we detached the hoses from the small seed box that seeds the clover to allow more of a broadcast of the clover instead of seeding it at the same depth as the companion crop.
We had a really wet June and kind of a cool start to July. I would have liked to get another flush of weeds killed before we seeded this cover crop, but we kind of had a window to get it in. So there's a lot of weed competition here, which I think is why we're seeing the buckwheat look a little bit yellowed and not quite as lush as it should be. I think that it's competing for nutrients with a lot of the pigweed, the lady's thumb and lamb's quarter and other things out here, and some grass.
If conditions do allow and there is time for it, cultivating before planting will reduce weed pressure in the summer cover crop. Planting was done July 10th at Zestful Gardens. Holly was able to pass through the fields immediately before seeding. This later planting date meant fewer weeds, but more difficult conditions for establishing clover at Zestful Gardens. At Early Bird, with the earlier planting date, clover established well in both Sudan grass and buckwheat.
the understory here of the red clover, and then on the other section of the crimson clover is looking really lush. So I think there was enough soil moisture in early June this year that the clover germinated really well, and it wasn't too hot. It was kind of ideal conditions for the clover to take off. But for the Sudan grass, it was wet and cool, and so probably not as good conditions for it to really thrive. But at least we got good germination, and I'm gonna have to mow this week to deal with weed seeds. We don't want any weeds going to seed, but hopefully the Sudan grass will bounce back faster than some of these weeds that are heading up, and maybe I'll compete them later on in the summer when the temperature goes up. So what I'm most excited about here is, hopefully keeping the weeds, the weed bank managed, and then if the clovers can survive the winter, if they can handle the mowings this summer, and then they can sort of persist through the winter, and if we can get some early flowering on the clovers, I like to get crops transplanted out here sometime in early May. That's kind of my target, to get stuff planted out here, and we're wet. We're at the bottom of the valley, so May is about as early as I can get a crop in. But if we can mow in and disc in that are turn under, we'll probably have to plow because of all this grass. But if we can turn under to the clover in May after it flowers, then we can get some nitrogen benefit and hopefully retain a lot of the nutrients that the chickens dropped through their foraging. If we can retain some of that fertility from the chickens and from this cover crop into next season, for our summer crops next year, then it'd be a success. So.
We have buckwheat and Sudan grass planted as an overstory, kind of a nurse crop with clover planted underneath. Really nice stand here of buckwheat. In the understory of this plot is crimson clover, and that looks pretty good too. So the idea is that the buckwheat is mowed off and the crimson clover, planted on the same date, will establish. See some wading into the Sudan grass here. This is right up to my chest. And again, crimson clover is in the understory of this one. Interestingly, looks like a few more weeds in the Sudan grass, but also nice crimson clover established in the understory. This is a buckwheat plus red clover plot, and I just wanted to point something out that's interesting. We struggle with how to plant clover and other crops simultaneously, since the clover is such a small seeded crop. It really wants to be planted more shallow, and these are non-irrigated plots. So what I'm noticing is what we did when we planted is we detached the tubes from the seed bin, so the clover is just kind of thrown all over the plot, while the buckwheat is more precisionally drilled down in a furrow. And what's interesting is it seems like all of the clover that did germinated inside of the furrow. So here you can see buckwheat plant, another buckwheat plant, and then right here clover plant, clover plant, clover plant. The earlier planting date at Early Bird was challenging for establishing buckwheat and Sudan grass, though buckwheat was slightly better. Planting a few weeks later with another cultivation and flush of weeds may have been better for these two crops and resulted in fewer weeds. However, clover, especially crimson clover, established very well. The red clover was looking even better than crimson clover in the following February, and both are likely to grow well in the spring. Both Sudan grass and buckwheat yielded great biomass and very few weeds at Zestful Gardens, but neither clover yielded much biomass by August. Establishment in the spring will be evaluated. All right. I don't have much more to say. I think we'll postpone for the Q&A, but I think our next speaker is Holly, so she can comment on that. I think one epilogue to note is we didn't actually end up mowing at Holly's place. I think she was very excited about all that biomass, and just those are both going to winter kill. One reason to mow might be a worry about buckwheat seed, and maybe that's something Holly can comment on. But we'll still, in any case, go and see if there's any clover surviving. So this is kind of real-time, ongoing research.
Yeah, let's go ahead and jump ahead. Thanks, Doug. Always interesting here where I'm at in the high desert, dry, irrigated stuff. Hearing about not needing water to establish things is kind of an interesting concept.